call this meeting of the Madison Select Board to order on Monday, December 12th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Please join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The record show all selectmen are present. Consent agenda warrant number 17, 11/29/22, number 18, 11/14/22, payroll register number 47, 11/24/22, and number 48, 12/1/22.
Make a motion to accept it.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to accept the payroll register as read and the warrant as read. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Acceptance of the meeting minutes from November 28th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes of November 28th, 2022. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. We're going to skip down to old business. Mr. Moody?
None, sir.
Mr. Manager? Mr. Gopian?
None.
Mrs. Dwyer?
I'll second.
All right. Items of communication. Mr. Town Manager?
All right, thank you. Received some good news from Julie Forbes at the Public Library. The Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation have awarded them $50,000, and
Wow.
that's to repair the rotting windows in the dome up at the very top. Last year, when we put the new roof on there, the roofers noticed that the windows were coming out, so they had to basically put some partitions over them. We have an estimate. Not many people do this work. George Elias helped point us in the right direction. We have an estimate to repair those windows at $75,000. So this $50,000 will go toward that, and Julie assured me that they'll use some of their carry forward money, and the trustees will use some of their funds to finish it. So that's very good for that building.
Awesome.
December 1st was the deadline for everybody to get in their tax stabilization forms. Residents, taxpayers 65 and older. The town received 322 applications. We had to calculate the total value for the state. They wanted to know what every town got for applications. So that represents about an average of $100,000 per parcel, or $32 million worth of valuation. My guess is property taxes are probably going to go up next year just because of the rising home prices that will continue. And if everybody's taxes go up about $200, that means the state will have to reimburse us about $65,000. Now you multiply that times the 400 other communities in the state's probably going to have to come up with about $25 million to fund this program, and they haven't done that yet. So just keep that in mind.
Is there any talk of any legislation changing in the coming legislature?
There is talk of changing it, but believe it or not, this is an extremely popular program with a certain group of constituents, and so the likelihood of changing this program is not that strong. So, speaking of strong, I don't know if everybody's aware of minimum wage. Minimum wage will go up January 1st to $13.80 an hour. That's a jump of $1.05. It was $12.75, $13.80. That affects everybody in the second half of our budget when it comes to recreation, ice rinks, all the employees that the town has that work at that minimum wage level. That's an 8% increase. Just a note on the meetings coming up. Christmas and New Year's holidays are closing the office on Mondays, 26th and January 2nd. The offices will be closed. So right now, unless the board directs me differently, the next scheduled meeting would be January 9th. So you'd be going almost 30 days from today before the next scheduled board meeting. We will, however, have an AP warrant for accounts payable the week of the 27th. And so we'll need folks to come in and sign that once it's ready to go, so we can continue to pay our bills on a regular schedule.
What was that date, Tim, again?
The second Monday in January, which will be January 9th.
Mr. Gopian?
Can we have one on the 27th?
It's up to you, if you want to continue to meet in the meantime. just that Monday will be off. If the board wants to schedule a meeting, then I guess you get with Mr. Vinziano. I'd be available.
You know, I mean, we gotta see what happens tonight, right?
I just need to know a week ahead of time to post it.
Is the board interested in meeting the 27th?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
So why don't we put that down, and we'll see if we come up with anything for an agenda. If we don't, then we won't. Does that make sense? No, don't if we won't. Is politically correct.
Sounds good.
Grammatically correct, probably.
I did put in your packets, and I just wanted to take a few minutes in communication items to discuss and lay out the process of this recall election that is currently in process right now. The paperwork has been filed at the town office to recall Mr. Manter using the process from the town ordinance, which is chapter 120, and I made some copies. There should be in your packets, and there are some here tonight. 5 registered voters have signed a sworn affidavit, and they've become a petitioning committee. They've signed a statement outlining their reasons that Mr. Manter should be recalled. And then following the ordinance, the town clerk put together the papers to gather signatures. The committee has 30 days to gather at least 194 signatures. That number 194 is 10% of the total turnout at the last governor's election. The last governor's election was just a few weeks ago in November, and we had 1,940 some people vote that day. So that's where that number comes from. So assuming that they can get those signatures back to the town office by January 4th, that would be the 30th day. Then, after that, the clerk has 5 days to certify all the signatures, to make sure that all accurate enrolled voters in Madison. If those signatures don't come back by January 4th, then the process stops. If the clerk determines that there's not the correct number, 194 of registered voter, the process stops. So assuming that that number comes back, then the clerk has to bring to the select board the petition at the next scheduled meeting. That's why it's kind of important if we decide if they come back next week with all the signatures, then the next scheduled meeting could be the 27th. If it's after Christmas, it could be January 9th. But you don't have to hold a special meeting. It's at your next scheduled meeting. At that point, the board has to set a date for the recall election. And the election has to be processed in the same manner as your regular elections. So it has to be at the polls, it has to be a polling place, and you have to allow 30 days of absentee voting. So you couldn't call for an election a week later, because the clerk is going to need time to do the absentee voting. The clerk is also going to need time to prepare special ballots for this and special envelopes, since we can't use the state's envelopes for absentee voting. So there's some time here. We've got to pull things together. The ordinance also requires that you have multiple items on the ballot. Your first question would be yes or no, do you recall this official? So that's the first question. Underneath that question is the name of a nominee, or if there's multiple nominees, to replace that person. We can't just, because of the ordinance, you can't just go with a recall. Our ordinance actually requires that we put the name of a potential person to replace on the same ballot. So somebody has asked me, well, if you just run a recall election, can't you just run with 4 board members until June? We could, if we didn't have it specifically worded that way in our ordinance. Now, this is not a state ordinance we're following our ordinance, which was created 25 years ago. So that's what chapter 120 is. So that is all I know right now. Does the board have any questions or comments?
Thank you. So we're looking, if that came back January 9th, we're looking at March probably before anything could happen.
Once that comes back, then the process is between you and the town clerk to determine, because there has to be the nomination papers that go out. If someone wants to take that position, they have to go get 25 signatures, turn them back in. That's right.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Town Manager?
No.
All right, new business. All right, number one, department heads. We have the department head report from the sheriff. Anything from our road commissioner?
Let me talk about that in a second. I want, Fire Chief Don French is here.
Yeah, I was gonna get him.
You have his reports.
Yeah, we have his report.
Yeah. I didn't know if
Any
you had
questions for Dawn?
any comments from Don?
Dawn, anything?
I'd like to wait if we can a couple minutes. My Deputy Chief, Dan Bosworth, is on his way. Is that okay if we wait?
So I do have some updates on a couple of different things, including the highway department. First of all, at the town office, we have hired a bookkeeper, human resources. She started last week. Her name is Jill Wyman. She's had 20-plus years experience working in Madison. She was the office manager for Dr. Friedman's office while he offered his dental services for many years. She's a fast study. She's been focusing mostly on payroll and accounts payable. That fills all the vacancies at the town office. So now we are back to full staffing at the office. So I'm very pleased about that. I have been keeping a log sheet since a couple weeks ago, since I was appointed as the interim road commissioner. And I just wanted the board to know and the public to know how my time is being divided. And I'm also handling the general assistance calls that come in, and that's, usually see an uptick as you get into the colder weather and around Christmas time. So I just keep a note of the interactions that I have when it comes to general assistance, and I've had 17 of them over the last 2 weeks, just to kind of give you an idea. Jay's last day in the office was the 28th as the code officer. Since then, I've taken 10 code enforcement calls. Over a 2-week period, that's not too bad. In regards to interactions with the road commissioner and that work with the highway, taking calls, checking things, that sort of thing, I've done about 20 of those interactions in regards to the road commissioner work. So you'll notice on the agenda that there was an executive session scheduled for the road commissioner to come and speak to the board tonight. About 2 weeks ago, I met privately with the road commissioner. We talked for about an hour and a half, and he indicated he might be willing to come back and finish out his term. He was going to talk to you about that, but after reconsidering and thinking about it, he approached me today and told me that it's not something he wants to do. And so I said, okay, I respect your decision, and we'll move forward. I think that the road crew is doing a good job. Fortunately, we haven't had much storms to worry about. We've got something brewing at the end of the week that may be a 3 to 6 inch type of snowfall that might turn to rain over the weekend, so we've got to be prepared for that. Peter Payne, I've met with him, and he has agreed to be the foreman, and so he is leading the shop at this point, making sure the crew has what they need. I'm handling the bills, I'm checking the phones, and I'm interacting with phones and emails that usually pertain to the road commissioner. We did hire 2 more call-in workers. So right now we have 5 full-time staff at the highway garage, and we have 3 call-in workers that will only come in during storms. So that fills all the seats, fills all the routes, and I'm confident that Peter has things in place to handle what we may need in coming storms. So that's the situation at the town garage right now. Since I'm going to continue in this capacity, Tris has put together a certificate of appointment. Since the board, the majority of the board appointed me as the road commissioner last week, or last meeting, we do need to have that signed. So I'll leave that there. My only other comments in regards to the road commissioner, I would like for this board to work with me over the coming weeks to consider posting this position and putting information out there, seeing if we can get some applicants, seeing if we can schedule some interviews. And I'm certainly not opposed to doing interviews with the full board or certain members of the board. I do not believe that my interim work as road commissioner is the long-term solution. And if Mr. Wright is not coming back, we need to post this position and start on this process. So that's my request to the board.
Moody?
Tim, this is an elected position,
It is an elected position, and that.
so how does that work with what you're saying here?
Same thing that Skowhegan did when their road commissioner quit in the middle of his term, is they interviewed people that would be good candidates, but when they offered the job to those candidates, they knew full well that they would have to take out papers and run for that. So that's what they did in Skowhegan.
So they would be like an intern person until the next
Until the next election.
election? Okay.
So a person, and this, understandably, this shrinks the pool of applicants pretty small.
Yeah.
Because you know if you're applying for a job, you can talk about pay and benefits and all those things, but you can have the job for 6 months and you don't win the election, you don't have the job anymore. The other thing the board may want to consider is the town ready to change this from an elected to appointed position? And right now, after last year's town meeting, the term for the road commissioner, if they are elected this year, is a 3-year term. So if you run the risk of getting somebody that's elected that can't work with you as a board, you're kind of stuck for 3 years unless they quit. Because you don't have the authority to fire an elected road commissioner. They would have to go through the same process of recall. So if the board wanted to consider changing that, I've got an email out to legal at Maine Municipal. But I believe if you change that at a special town meeting 90 days before the June town meeting, you could change that from elected to appointed, or change the term if you wanted to do any of those things. So those are kind of the options for dealing with that situation, because it is an awkward situation to try to hire somebody.
So I guess let's wait until we get their opinion back and see what they say on, and then we can talk about whether we're interested in pursuing that, changing that over. Any other questions? Any other comments, Mr. Town Manager?
No, not on that.
Okay. Donnie, I see. Was there another
I'm good, yeah.
another subject?
Oh, no.
Okay, all right.
If Donnie has a report, that's fine.
Mr. Fire Chief.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful.
It was brought to your attention, excuse me, that I'd like to go in executive session to do this, and I'd like to know if we can still do this. Some things that I'd like to bring up that I don't think should be brought up in the public, and I'd like to bring it up with the board members.
Well, I think that if we're gonna do that, then we have to do it at our next meeting, because we're gonna publish it, we're gonna put it out there, and, make it public that that's going to happen. Before we do that, I'm not gonna direct an executive session right now.
Why can't we go in executive session now? I just don't understand that.
Okay,
Somebody
hasn't
canceled
been
it.
advertised as one.
Who you got to advertise? I don't understand the system. That's all.
Yeah, I believe you have to advertise for one if you are, the other members can chime in here against me if you want to, but I believe you have to do that. Mr. Moody.
Yeah, Donnie, I believe the way that works, let me get back here. The way that works is it has to be put on an agenda. It's too late to go on this agenda, and by putting it on the agenda, then it has to be posted for X number of days. Then the agenda can be accepted. We just can't stick you on the way it is right now to an executive session, because it has to be posted on a new agenda.
Okay, I guess with that decision, I'll bring up a few things. I won't get into detail about anything. I'd like to bring up a few things. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Everybody's aware of that. The people that don't know me, I'm Madison Fire Chief Don French. My Deputy Chief Dan Bosworth's over there. Lieutenant Martin Bailey's over here. This has been quite a concern for Madison Fire Department over the last several months. I've been in Tim's office a number of times, I probably can't count the times of bringing up this subject. He's also been in touch with Mr. Vinciano on this subject, and nothing to me is getting done. In the last 2 weeks, I'm gonna bring it up, what's happening, has happened in the last 2 weeks. So nothing's been resolved on this as far as I'm concerned. I'm speaking for my fire department. I've had my fire members come to me with this. It's a big problem to them, and I'm 100% behind them. Madison Fire Department's concern is Anson Fire Department is being called by phone or being toned out request of A&M ambulance service to assist them in the town of Madison. So in other words, anytime that the ambulance service needs assistance in the town of Madison, lift assist, a code 99, blah, 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 they're toning, is Somerset Com, is toning them out. Somerset Com has nothing to do with this. They are doing what they are asked. So this does not involve Somerset Com at all. It's between us and A&M and Anson Fire. And Madison Fire on these calls are not being toned out at all. We're not even being toned. This is in our town. I've been in the fire service for many, many, many years, and it's been our protocol that any call in our town, we will be toned. If for some reason we don't have enough personnel on scene, which could happen, we're very short-handed during the day, I would absolutely reach out to Anson Fire or Skowhegan Fire, wherever the department is that is closest to deal with this issue. Let me get my glasses, I'm getting ahead of myself. The other day, Heald Street, I believe it was, A&M was told they were out of town. They had to get an ambulance out of Harmony, they had to get one out of Bingham. The crew from Bingham Ambulance got on scene, my captain was on scene. The guy from Bingham Ambulance said, let's get Anson Fire here, tone them out. My captain said, no, this is in Madison, let's tone us out. I think it's very easy to solve this problem. All we're asking for, the fire department, if the call is in the town of Madison, tone Madison Fire. We've done this for many, many years, and there's never been a time when we've turned down any calls on the ambulance service. That's a comment. Now my question to you is, who is directing the ambulance services and ambulance crews to tone Anson Fire on every call? And they're using the excuse that Anson Fire is now full-time 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. We had a call the other morning on Miami Avenue, a code 99 at 5:30 in the morning. I had 4 of my fire departments en route, and I had a couple listening in case we needed more manpower. They still toned Anson at 5:30 in the morning to go Miami Avenue. If they wanted a closer ambulance, a closer mutual aid, they should have called Skowhegan Fire, which is full-time, and they have 2 EMTs on scene. So I don't know where they're going with this or what they're trying to do with this thing, but it's becoming a big problem for Madison Fire Department. And I've been trying to resolve this problem for many, many months, and nothing is getting done.
All right, I certainly have been in contact with you, Don, and talked about it with you and Tim, and I've also contacted George Demchak, who is the director of Anson Madison Ambulance, Anson Madison Starks Ambulance. He assures me that it's not. I mean, Anson. One of the issues that has been brought up is the ambulance service paying for these lift assists from outside of the town of Madison, from the Anson firefighters. He assures me that they are not paying for them, and I don't know exactly why they're toning them out. I think if we can provide that in our town, we should be providing it, and we should be toned. They should be toned out, which we can send a letter to George and tell him that when you have a lift assist in Madison, it needs to be Madison Fire. What's that?
Specifically, any medical call, not just a lift assist, to make sure.
Any medical call. So if we can put a letter together and send it to them, I believe we've already done that. But the idea of them paying for it is not happening, to my knowledge. Okay? All right, Mr. Moody.
I believe there is a protocol that the town can set up with a comm center.
You're exactly right. This has nothing to do with Thompson.
listen, it does have something to do, and the reason I say that is because if they get the calls originally, they get the calls originally, then they have a book there of protocols that if the call comes in from Anson, then they have a list of who they're supposed to tone out.
Exactly right.
Now, I don't know if this town has that protocol with Madison, that any calls in Madison, the protocol is to call the fire department first, and they have a list, 1, 2, and 3. Now, I don't know if that's been done. If it hasn't, maybe you ought to check into that, because there is a protocol set, and then people have to go by that. But if they don't have that protocol, and Anson has got their protocol in there, they're gonna get it first. So I'd check on
Yes,
that.
I've been on Madison Fire, with the exception of the last 8 months or so, that has been protocol.
Well, I'd double check with them, Donnie.
With who?
With the comm center, to see if there is, you wanna step back a little bit? To see if there is a protocol system that Madison has with the comm center. You see what I'm saying?
I have a number of protocols. If it's
Do
a-
they have it? They're the
Yes,
ones
they
that-
do. Whenever they get a call at comm center,
they
they go by their protocol. Example,
Then they
structure
shouldn't
fire.
be toning out Anson for something in Madison.
They will, yes, because why it's happening is whoever's working the ambulance service is hollering to Somerset Comm, would you please Tony Anson Fire to go to 14 Middle Street. They're doing what they're asked. There's no protocol that's gonna change anything.
All right.
So I guess we have to ask the town manager to sit down with George and get this ironed out and get it so it works the way we want it to work, which is Madison is toned out to these, and if we cannot be toned out, then it's somebody else is toned out. We do not want that. We do not want them to take over. We do want somebody at the medical event though. So we gotta just make sure that we get it correct, I guess. So I guess I'm gonna ask the town manager if he can set up something with George and sit down with him and go over and what he sees as being necessary for us to make this happen.
Did you read Mr. Demchek's email?
I did, yes. Yep. I mean, I that's why I'm gonna ask the town manager, and basically the email said that he needs to have people there. And so he's asking for help in certain situations. I mean, I'm not there. I'm not, and I have no knowledge of police work or ambulance work.
I've explained it to you.
So, yes, you have, Donnie. You
So I
have.
didn't know where.
Yeah. Well, I just know what he's telling me, so that's why I'm going to ask the town manager to go and talk to him about that and see what we can work out and what's happening.
So,
Yes.
and I'll be glad to do that, but in reference to the email that was circulated
Yeah.
around, Mr. Demchek seemed to indicate that it was up to the crew's discretion when they're either en route or on the scene to call certain places. And he made it clear that he knows that Anson has 2 full-time firefighters during the day, so that's going to be a natural inclination to call them. So you folks are all on the board of directors for AMS with Anson Starks. I just want to know, is that the policy of AMS to leave those types of calls up to the discretion of the responder?
I don't have that answer.
Okay, so I'll ask that to
Yep.
George as well. All right, thanks.
All right, anything else, Donnie? Danny?
No, I just want to elaborate on Mr. Moody's comment. We do have protocols that are written, and anytime that they do dispatch us, we give them a timeline, because obviously in the daytime, we do have firefighters that work out of town, and personnel issues, just like any other town in the whole world now. So there's a certain time, if they don't hear anybody get on and acknowledge that call, they're automatically going to dispatch Anson Fire. That's any nature of the call, so that's set in. So what is happening is, like the chief said, they have a certain individual that is calling the comm center and making that request. Who that person is, I don't know, it doesn't matter, but Somerset's not gonna deny that request. They're gonna go ahead and they're gonna push the button, they're gonna get the appropriate people coming who they said, and then they'll worry about dealing with the aftermath afterwards. All right, so, I'm torn between this. I get it, I get both sides. I really feel bad that it got this far. At the end of the day, you know, we need to provide the town of Madison, the degree of response that is needed. If we can't do that, if we can't put hands on as fast as they need it, absolutely, call Anson. If it's close to Norwalk, call Norwalk. If it's close to Skowhegan, call Scout, you know, wherever. We need to work together. And what I see, this is just pushing everybody apart, and we can't have that. And we need to somehow put this to bed, put it to rest, whatever we want to call it. We need to get and work together with every department that borders us, and even outside of that, because, like I said, every department is struggling, and we need each and every person that will show up to the calls, you know, so. But,
You know, especially about you people, you should have some professional courtesy there anyways.
hold on a second, I gotta put my hearing device in, Ron, I'm sorry.
I said, especially amongst you people you're all in the same field of work, you should have some professional courtesy working back and forth, and it'll flow a lot easier. And I would recommend to the town manager to call the comm center and see how that is set up, and I think you'll find it's kind of like I said, and I think the town can have their own protocol that calls from this town should be toning out the emergency people that should be toned out. But you might want to double check to see how that's set up down there, and maybe we can correct it that way, I don't know.
I think you also have to talk about the direct call from the ambulance to the comm center. I think that's gotta be talked about. All right, any other questions? Thank you. All right, number 2, discuss, that's everybody, right?
Yep, we're all set.
Number 2, discuss alternate code enforcement appointment, David Savage.
So I believe that most folks are aware that Leo Mayo has always been appointed our alternate code officer, and he was appointed through the end of June. Leo has gotten done, he's let his certifications lapse in December, and so he's no longer eligible to serve as our alternate. Jay Watt was appointed as code officer, and that term continues through June 30th. As of December 1st, Jay is working a per diem schedule now, so he's not full-time, he's not part-time, he doesn't have any office hours. Basically, if we get a call that he needs to do an inspection or issue a permit, he'll come in and work with that person, which is the same way we've always paid Leo for years. But I believe it's very important that we have a certified code officer as an alternate, especially in the case of plumbing inspections and that sort of thing, which have to be reported to the state. So I talked with Dave Savage. As many of you know, he has now taken a new position in the town of Norwalk. He is the full-time code officer / fire chief in Norwalk, and he's a little closer to us than when he was working in Oakland. So he has agreed to work as our alternate code officer. I also checked with Richard LaBelle, the town manager in Norwalk, make sure I wasn't stepping on any toes, and he had no problems with it. So I would like to see if the board would entertain a motion to appoint David Savage as our alternate code officer and licensed plumbing inspector.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to appoint David Savage as the alternate code enforcement officer
And licensed plumbing.
and licensed plumbing inspector. Any questions?
I would just add that what we budget for in our budget right now is $24 an hour, and that's what we would pay. I checked with Dave, and he said he would do it for that. I just said out of curiosity, it's public information, what are you getting paid in Norwalk? And he said $33 an hour. So just keep that in mind as we head into budget season for these positions.
All right, seeing no other questions, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. All right, number 3, discuss personnel policy review.
I'm just passing around the appointment paperwork for your signatures. There's one for plumbing inspector and there's one for code officer. For Dave, thank you very much. On your desk or in your packets this week, you should have received a edited copy of the personnel policy. And I've tried to do a couple of things. I certainly don't anticipate trying to cover all 20 pages tonight. If the board is willing, I'd like to do this over the course of several meetings for a couple of reasons. One, you have a collective bargaining agreement with the highway department that comes up in June of this year. So as you head into the new year, you'll be involved in negotiating a new highway contract. In previous meetings, Mr. Agopian and others have mentioned what are the parallels between the highway contract and the personnel policy. So this is a good opportunity to start looking at the personnel policy so we're all familiar with it. In red, I believe, is the color font. Under each section, I make a note to say where this section is in the highway contract. The highway contract is not ordered A to Z the same way the personnel policy is. So you kind of have to bounce around to find the same things. It's not really fair to our union workers to open up the highway contract and look at it during a selectmen's meeting. So in lieu of doing that, I just put those references into this. And Peter and the highway crew have a copy of this and these edits. The other thing that is important is over the course of this last year, there have been a number of things that have been discussed by the board. The board has made some motions, and I put them in yellow in this document. And I think we need to codify that when we're done, however long this process is of looking at the changes and proposed changes to the personnel policy, so that we go into the new year with a clean document. We have several new employees. It's important that everybody has the same document in front of them when it comes to the personnel policy. So what I propose to do tonight is to try to cover pages 4, 5, 6, and the top part of page 7. So what's your thoughts on that?
Now let's give it a try.
All right. I'll go as fast or as slow as you want, and I'll pause for questions as we go through section by section.
We also can ask questions later.
You can ask questions. You can look at it, come back to the next meeting with questions. And,
Yep.
we'll go as slow as we need to make sure everybody is in agreement with this. So section 1 is the preamble, which basically determines what this document is, and it makes it very clear that every time it's updated, that the handbook that's updated by the board, it supersedes all previous policies and practices. The exciting part's over, so people are leaving. All right. And it also talks about the fact that this applies to all employees unless they're covered by a collective bargaining agreement. And this handbook is not an employment contract and should not be construed that way. Any questions on section 1? Mr. Rowe.
Yes, on this first part, so this is just the policy, it has nothing to do with their time, the amount of money they make, or anything like that?
So you're talking about like pay for all the employees?
Right, doesn't this cover this in here, looking ahead?
I think that's a difference between the highway collective bargaining agreement and the townspeople. The townspeople don't have a 3-year automatic raise, right?
Okay, so each year, we give them what we want, they don't negotiate it at all?
That's correct for all employees outside of collective bargaining. So for those employees in collective bargaining, you try to reach a term like a 3-year agreement. And within that collective bargaining agreement, you have, well, in 2023, they'll get this percent, 2024, that percent, 2025, that percent. But that's not in this personnel policy, because that doesn't apply. Any other questions? Section 2 is a pretty boilerplate equal employment non-discrimination policy. It's good to have in all your policies, and this is word for word the same as what's in the highway contract. Any questions on that? Section 3 defines the types of employment that we have. And you see in letter A says the appointing authority means the town manager. This is where that word appointing and hiring can be interchanged. When we had the discussion at town meeting last year about changing the clerk's position from elected to appointed, someone asked the question in the meeting, well, who appoints? Well, according to the personnel policy, the town manager who does the hiring essentially appoints that position. That gets confusing because then in the first meeting in June after town meeting, we bring to you a whole slew of appointments. Those appointments have to be done by you to give the authority to that person to do business on behalf of the town. So that's where we get a little confused with the definition of appointing. Contractual arrangement, basically those are some of our workers that work as independent contractors. For example, we have a custodian for the library. That he does not fall under this personnel policy because he's a contracted worker. So, types of employment or types of appointment, and again, I think you could interchange that word appointment or employment. And then there's the list 2 through 8 as the different classes of employment. First one is, number 2 is full-time employees, anybody who works 40 hours a week. Just a note that in the collective bargaining agreement, that agreement only applies to 40-hour-a-week people. People that work in any other category are not covered under the collective bargaining agreement. They're covered under this policy. So then there's permanent part-time, means an employee who is scheduled to work less than 40 hours a week. We have several of these at the town office, at the library, so forth. They schedule 16, 24 hours a week. They receive benefits in proportion to those who work 40 hours. Number 4 gets back to appointed employees. And I noted here that this policy refers to our town charter. Madison does not have a town charter. We only operate by a code of ordinances, so that's why I recommended that strike the word charter and put in ordinance. So for example, these would be your tax collector, your voter registrar, your emergency management. These are positions that are usually held by other employees, but they're also appointments. Seasonal full-time, number 5, that's an employee that is scheduled to work a 40-hour week for a designated time of the year. In past years, we have hired seasonal part-time plow drivers. They'll come in, they'll work a full 40-hour week from November to the end of March, but they're not full-time year-round. Temporary seasonal, on-call, reserve, and per diem employees. As I mentioned in the highway department, we've hired 3 on-call people, so they'll only come in when they're on call. They don't receive any other benefits other than the rate of pay they agreed to. This is what the code officer is right now. So our code officer right now is a per diem employee. He only gets paid for the time and mileage that he works at this point. Your fire department, most of your firefighters are on-call firefighters. So they do get paid a small hourly wage for the work that they put in when they come on call. And then the last 2 are students and volunteers, and they're pretty self-explanatory. So any questions on all these different categories of employees? Questions or concerns?
To go.
Yes, on these seasonal employee time people, these are the people who work up at the town garage?
As of right now, we don't have any seasonal full-time people.
Okay,
We have on-call, but in past winters, we have.
right.
What we've noticed in the job pool over the last couple of weeks, or last couple of years, we've had more people that want to work on-call than come in and work a full 40-hour week. And in some cases, if the weather's not bad, they get paid 40 hours for just standing around.
So is this number 5, is that also included in that contract?
No, seasonal full-time workers are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
Just number 2 are covered by the.
The only people covered by the
Covered
CBA
number
are number 2, right? All right, any other questions on that? Okay, so this section, section 4, is hiring, promoting, and exiting requirements. We talked quite a bit about this during last meeting, and so I thought it was apropos that we cover this. So recruitment, the town shall recruit applicants and will conduct the job search in a manner consistent with its equal opportunity policy. Current employees are encouraged to apply for vacant positions. The town will select the person best suited for the position. The town reserves the right to adopt procedures to conduct the application and selection process and to modify and/or reopen any job search that the applicant pool does not meet the town's needs. So I believe that recruitment part was left pretty intentionally vague, as most personnel policies are, and that allows the town or the board to change the process of recruiting and interviewing and hiring. But as of right now, there's a lot of leeway in how we do that. So many questions were asked as to how I came about the decision to hire Jay as a code officer. And essentially, I followed the policy because there was not a clear process to follow in that particular case. So section B, selections, all applicants shall be notified in writing as to whether an interview, test, or both are to be scheduled and the date and time of the same. Unsuccessful applicants should be notified in writing and their appreciations expressed for applying. These days, most of that is done by email. And our emails are public records, and so we usually, if somebody applies for a job and they're not selected for the job, I respond saying, thank you, we'll keep your application on file, but we didn't make a hire in that case.
Yes, and some of these hiring positions, I think you should have somebody off the board with you on those committees.
Right, and I think that goes in that highlighted section is the right to adopt procedures. The town and the selectmen have the right to adopt those procedures. So that's where we get back to this proper communication between me and you, me and the board. Like, for example, if we're going to hire a road commissioner, certainly the board should be involved in that. If we're going to hire a code officer, I think based on past experience, the board should be involved in that. I'm going to defer to you as to how far you want to go with that. You want to go to every employee? So,
You asking me?
well, I'm asking.
I think
the
that's a
board.
discussion we can have as we go along. We're looking at the policy. We're not gonna write that in here.
Okay.
But we're looking at that policy. If we decide, when that comes about, I think we can decide if 2 members of the board are gonna be part of that, or we can, or 1 member, or how, we can't have 3, but unless you're gonna call a meeting, then you
Right.
have to go to executive session, but
Right.
that would be kind of crazy. But I think you're looking at, the procedure is open, so we have to set the procedure at another time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
We're not gonna write the procedure in here.
I would recommend not doing that.
Yeah.
I think that's
So-
the way it's worded leaves the board with the purview of saying, I think we
So
need to do this.
If we are going to have a procedure, it can be different for every job we have. Right?
Right. And again, that gets back to the communication.
Right.
The only thing I was asking was when you're gonna hire a position, whether it's at the town garage or whether it's in the office or wherever it may be, I think that you should have somebody off the board to go on this committee, the hiring committee. I don't think it's really necessary to take people out of their job during the day, to have them go around and have them on the interview committee with you. I think there should be other people, outside people necessarily, but the selectmen should be.
All right? I'll make a note of that.
Yep.
We'll continue on. Item number 2 in the bottom of page 5, interviews of the applicant shall be conducted by the town manager or his or her designee, or both. The town is under no obligation to interview all or any of the applicants. They may screen applications for selection of persons to interview. During the interviewing, only questions directly related to the job requirements may be asked. It's the intent of the Madison Select Board that a positive image of the town and its staff be conveyed to the interviewee regardless of whether the applicant is hired. Item 3, all applications shall be kept on file for 10 months, and any applicable test results. Yep. Number 4, the town will not retain applications, resumes, or letters of interest in any town job that has not been advertised or solicited for an open position. This happens every once in a while where someone will just come and drop off a resume saying, if you're hiring, let me know. And we're not obligated to keep those. And the application is the key. Once you have an application, you're obligated to keep that. So any questions on the hiring process?
Mooney.
Hey, number 2, Tim. People were just talking about a hiring committee with the town manager. Does this seem to restrict that?
Well, again, it's probably intentionally vague.
Okay.
It says the interviews shall be conducted by the town manager or their designee or both. There's nothing in here that would restrict that designee from being a member of the select board. If the town manager and a member of the select board wanted to do the interview like Mr. Agopian said.
The only reason I'm asking is because it sounds like only one person's going to be doing the interviewing, and instead of a hiring committee, so to speak, that would include a member of the board. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The language kind of leans towards one individual.
Do we want the town manager to bring back language for number 2 that says it shall be the town manager with a member of the board with another person? I mean,
It's quite a different picture if you say shall or may.
Yep.
Yeah. I think we can loosen that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Item C on page 6 is the probationary period. That's pretty standard. Employees are considered probationary for the first 6 months of employment. Now, how this affects the collective bargaining agreement is a full-time hire in the highway department cannot join the union in the first 6 months. So they're on the probationary period. So we have 2 new hires up at highway that have been there 2 months. They currently fall under this. They don't fall under the CBA because they haven't been there to pass their probationary period yet. Physical examinations, the town may require that, and the town will pay for it if we do require it. Personnel records, we keep private personnel files, and people can view them with the permission that's allowed there.
Are those files secured?
Yes, they're in a locked cabinet in a locked office. Yeah. Item F is separation. Resignations should be submitted in writing to the town manager. 10 working days notice is considered reasonable and appropriate. The town reserves the right upon receipt of a resignation to end the employment immediately and pay the employee in lieu of the notice period. Item 2, the town will attempt to hold exit interviews with all employees who resign to determine the exact reason for leaving the organization. A written record of the reason shall be kept in the employee's file, and a copy forwarded to the town manager's attention if he or she did not conduct the exit interview. The interview should also afford the town an opportunity to evaluate its effectiveness. This was mentioned last week during the meeting, that maybe the town should have exit interviews. We have it in our policy. The language is a little bit loose there. It says we'll attempt to hold an exit interview. I'll be perfectly frank with you, everywhere I've worked, I've never seen the value in exit interviews, because either people are mad or they're lying to you. And so that's my bias. And so if the board wants me to follow that policy, I'll be glad to do it to the best of my ability. I'm just voicing my opinion about exit interviews.
Can we come up with some written questions that are?
We can, yeah. There's plenty of HR support out there, so. All right, item number 3, any employee wishing to. Oh, I'm sorry, I was writing.
I have another question. On your personnel files
Yes,
that have to be locked,
yes.
when that individual exit terminates their employment, do those files go with them, or what happens to them?
That's a good question. Those files move, but they don't go with the individual. They move down into our vault downstairs, and
X number of
we're
years.
required
isn't
to
it?
keep them for so many years through state policy.
Yeah, I think it's like 7 years or something like that.
So,
Okay. So we're up on that?
yes.
Okay.
Item number 3, any employee wishing to leave the town of Madison's employment in good standing shall provide the town manager with written notice of intent to terminate employment 10 working days prior upon separation. The town shall pay all regular wages owed, as well as earned accrued leave pay due the employee under this handbook on the next regular payday. I made a note here that we have not practiced this over the last couple of resignations or people that have left. If people leave with time on the books, sick pay or vacation pay, we have allowed those individuals to continue to receive weekly checks over a period of time until all that earned pay is exhausted. According to this policy, we're not supposed to do that. According to the policy, if you have 16 weeks of leave, we need to figure out what that is and pay you one lump sum. So this is worth noting to circle back to, do you want to allow for our current practice, or do you want to hold to the language of this? So.
Mr. Mooney?
Which is more beneficial to the employee that's leaving? To break it up in weekly or give them one lump sum?
My guess, I'm not an accountant, but my guess is you're going to lose a lot of tax dollars in that lump sum.
Exactly.
And so there is that benefit over the period of time, which may be why we allowed it. But what I'm bringing up to you is that's not what it says.
But I think we ought to give them the choice. That would be my recommendation. If a person is exiting and they wanted it a lump sum, they're entitled to it. But as far as the next, what did it say, the next pay?
Right, next payday. Yeah.
If they leave on a Thursday, how are you gonna get it to them on?
Well, the following Thursday.
Yeah, but I think there should be a little bit more of a grace period here. You know, a couple of weeks, I mean, so that the people that are doing this paperwork aren't pushed up. Just a suggestion that we can come back to.
Under this separation, what's the difference between number 1 and number 3?
So, on number 1, this town has the right to say, you don't need to work here for another 9 days. You've given me your notice. Why don't you just pack up your stuff today, and we'll pay you for the next couple of weeks and whatever's due you.
Number 3 says what we're going to pay them.
Number 3 says you're leaving in good standing, you're going to work right through your last day of resignation, as many people have, and then we'll pay you out.
All right, any questions to that point? Anybody have any other questions? Anybody have any questions? I guess I would get to the town manager and, yes, Mrs.
With regard to the sick pay, they can only accrue a certain number of days, right?
Right.
And be paid for that at separation.
So
That's
right
Oh,
now,
yeah.
and we'll get to this eventually,
No, that's fine.
maybe next year, but they can earn so much sick pay, and there's a couple of what I believe is contradicting statements in this about who earns sick pay and who can receive payment of sick pay when they leave. There's 3 groups of employees. Those employees that have been there for 20 years can get all their sick pay paid out. Those employees who haven't been there for 20 years can get 25%. But then there's another clause in here that says if you were hired after 2015, you don't get any. So that's one of the issues we'll have to deal with when we get to that chapter.
Mr. Duchamp?
The reason why that's worded the way it is because that's Maine law. Maine law says you will pay an employee on their next regular paycheck for any final pay, hours worked, hours earned, any bonuses, or any accrued compensation, sick leave, or anything like that. That's Maine law. That's why it's worded that way.
All right, so if you have any other questions later on for our next meeting, and so the next meeting will go from section 5 through section,
Section 5 is pretty long. So
Section
we might-
5.
We may do section
we'll go to
5.
section 5. And if there's any question, we can follow up with sections 1 through
Yep.
1 through 4.
I'll, keep your copies with you, but I'll have copies and I'll send out some notes in between time. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. All right, select board concerns. Mr. Moody?
None.
Mr. Manta?
None.
Mr. Gopian?
None.
Mr. What? All right. Citizens' concerns. All right. See? Yes, sir.
We on Door 9 Adams Road here in Madison. I watched the last meeting that we had, and it prompted me to get back involved with the select board. And coming tonight has really shown that I feel like our town every day is getting more and more regressed. We're going backwards all the time. And I think what the issue that we're having is the folks making decisions in this town aren't looking for value. They're looking to cut, cut, cut. Where can we be cheap? Where can we save money? Our fire chief came in here tonight addressing a concern about where calls are going. You aren't even seeing the value of those calls. If they get toned out, every time they get toned out, that's a check mark. So when they come to you and they propose, hey, we need full-time firefighters in this town. You have no records of how many calls that the chief received to warrant that. He has no ground to stand on to say, we need this, we need that. You're gonna say, well, geez, well, you guys only responded to X amount of calls. And I could go across the whole board on everything when we're talking about personnel issues and hiring. You guys want to have a separate policy for every person that you hire in this town? You really think that that's a good idea? Isn't that what I heard? Is that the procedure for hiring them would be different based on the position that they're getting? But that's ridiculous. That's not equal opportunity. There's nothing equal opportunity about that. What you're saying is, well, in this case, it's okay for our town manager to have some jurisdiction and actually hire somebody. But in this case over here, well, I think I'd like to be a part of that, even if you're not qualified because you have no background in the field. So I think that if you guys are going to look at procedures and policies for hiring employees in this town, you really need to take a look at who's qualified to make that decision, and maybe do a video. Have the person doing the interviewing do a video and bring that to you guys, and then you guys can all watch it and make a collective agreement. But to say that one person from the board should be there, that to me is just ludicrous to think that one person has any more say over the rest of you. I mean, your job is to work collectively together, not individually, and looking out for the best interests of this town. You know, the code enforcement issue. You guys had an issue with code enforcement, and we can't have a full-time code enforcement person, but we have a mill that's firing up with a brand new type of product that's gonna go out on the market, and we don't have somebody that's right here at the beck and call to go and inspect that on the regular. We have a set of apartment buildings that are gonna be going up on Weston Ave, and you guys don't think that we should have somebody full-time keeping an eye on that? I mean, you guys are looking to be cheap all the time. And our town is constantly moving backwards. And now we're at the point where we're having divide inside of all of our departments because of money, because of who's getting this, who's getting that. Oh geez, can we get a raise? Well, let's go to the select board and talk to them and see what we can do. But the people aren't being represented very well. This town is not what it used to be. There used to be a full-time police department. There used to be, you know, firefighters in here all the time. There used to be a hustle and bustle and mill, and I got it. When the mill closed, we lost a lot of revenue. But you guys got to start looking for the future. Stop looking at what it used to be in this town. Because I have kids growing up in this town, and I pay taxes in this town, and I can tell you the direction you're taking it, I don't like it. And there's a lot of people who don't like it. You know, and when we talk about people having, you couldn't put him on the executive session because he needed to have 30-day notice to the people, right? Freedom of Access Act, that's what it's called. Mr. Moody, you look like you're confused about freedom
Okay,
of
I'm
access.
gonna stop you. We hear what you're saying.
No, let me make my final point,
I'm
Al,
gonna
come on.
stop you. So, we're gonna stop. So, if you have something other than code enforcement that you wanna say, you can do it, but you got about 30 seconds.
Okay, great, 30 seconds. So when you gentlemen met prior to the meeting to discuss the issues that you had with the town manager, that was very unethical because there was 3 of you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna
Whoa.
Stop.
Hang on.
Stop. Okay, we're stopping it right there.
All right.
All right? Any other citizens concerned?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Did you identify yourself and where you live?
I sure will. My name is Angela Bucher. I live at 1619 East Madison Road, Madison.
Thank you.
Over the years, I've left several messages for selectmen. I can't say who. Never heard back from anyone. I own a small business in this town, successful business, been there for 9 years. Not one of you has ever stopped by and said, "Hi, I'm a select person in this town. Is there anything we can do to help you, to make you more successful?" You don't do that in this town, and that's what we need. We are all working to make this town better, and we don't get any help. We don't get any recognition. I've asked CMP, I've asked the state for a street light at the end of our road. I've asked for stops. I've asked for a stop ahead. I've asked for a speed limit sign. Nothing. I can't get anybody to call me back. I've asked him for help in the past. He's helped me a little bit here and there with some code enforcement things over the years. I own a wedding venue. I've brought over 15,000 people in the last 9 years to this town who have accessed Airbnbs, restaurants. I've never seen one of you. Not one of you has ever done anything to help my business. And I think that is a shame. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, look for a motion.
I hate to do this. Sorry. Back to selectmen's concerns. Mr. Moody, you approached me this week with a concern from a citizen. Did you not want to bring that up?
I forgot, I would like to bring it up if you would.
Okay. It's up to Mr. Vinziano.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had an individual that lives on the Blackwell Hill Road come to my house, and he was concerned about the chip seal that was used this year out there on that road. His concern was that in his research, it showed there was all kinds of different chemicals that aren't good for you in this material. And he left me some paperwork, and I think you have, yeah, you have it here. And I brought it into the town manager to disperse. And most of his concern was not only the chemical, but the dust that it created. And I understand that this is completely different batch of chip seal than we've used before, because we never had that problem with the dust. And I guess the material with the dust and dirt was heavy enough, so they had to come back and sweep it up. But when we used it, like out on the bottom part of Preble Avenue, didn't have no dust, no complaints, what have you. And I think we used it again on a golf course road, and on that road,
That
I
was
think
2 years ago, I think.
yeah, and I think there was only one person that made a complaint on it. But other than that, my concern is if we continue to use this, I think we need some more justification, or especially from the state, because I guess they are using it also. I'm not sure, and the reason that they're using it and the reasons that they consider it safe to be used in the environment. I'm just looking for that strength of how we do not continue using this material. And I told him I would have it brought up to the board meeting.
So I did do some research and I talked with a couple of people about that. That's what I passed out. If you want the safety data sheets and all 50 pages of what the chemicals are, you're welcome to it. But that information is emails that I received from the DOT Environmental and Hazardous Waste Department. So the couple important things to remember. The chemicals that they use in the glue, essentially to put down chip seal, is the same as they use in hot top. So there's no different chemicals depending on the application. Hot top, chip seal, it's the same chemicals. This year they did use a different stone. They got it out of Augusta, where before they got it out of Pike's supply in Sydney. And this year on Blackwell Hill they used a different contracted sweeper. And it was awful. The dust, it was August, the wind was blowing. It was an awful application. But the benefit of chip seal is what you see right now. When freezing rain comes, that chip seal absorbs it and wicks it away. It doesn't build up as quickly on smoother asphalt. So the other thing that we fell down on in those email packets, and I'll take responsibility for it, we did not communicate with the residents on Blackwell Hill as well as we should have. We did a better job on Preble and Golf Course because there's pamphlets that you can actually get out and hand to every resident, say, this is coming, this is what this is, it's gonna be awful, but it's gonna be better in the long run. And we failed to do that on Blackwell Hill. Maybe it's because we assumed all those stubborn Curtises live there and they wouldn't listen anyways. So that's what I have on that.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Town Manager. We'll talk more about that. As you know, I've never been a real proponent of chip seal.
I'll
So,
just give you some ammo.
yeah, thank you. All right, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Adjourned at 7:40.